Welcome to the newest show on the United Football Media, the Sun Belt's home, Statement Saturday. I am here with my buddy Bobby from TNT College Football Podcast. Him and I are coming together. We're going to create some content on the Sun Belt, on the United Football Media. I'm sorry, we just rebranded, and it's still a little tricky for me. But United Football Media YouTube channel. What's going on, Bobby?
Hey, Webb. Good to be here. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this. I'm really looking forward to this. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Definitely. Tell everyone, while we got everyone's attention right now, tell everyone where they can find you on Twitter and social media.
Well, you can find my podcast at TNT College Foot 1 on Twitter. Spotify is where my podcast is for the most part. You can also follow me personally at Coach_B_Will on Twitter.
So me and Bobby just met like a week ago, and we both coach. We at least did coach college he coached college basketball. I coach rec ball and AAU ball, but we're just a bunch of 30-somethings, right? And we love the game. We love college football. We love the game of football, but we're coaches of basketball. It's the weirdest thing, but.
It is. That's my background too. Like you said, but it's a huge passion, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. Talking about, so we had media day this week, right? Sun Belt. Really a big day on the 25th and 26th. New Orleans, everything done in the Sun Belt is in New Orleans. Keith Gill opened it up, the commissioner for Sun Belt. And the thing I took away from the commissioner was the word rising. He only said it, 7,000 times. And he's really promoting that G5, that they're the power conference in the G5. You heard it from some of the coaches, and we'll go through it when we go through all the teams. But with the bright future. And it makes me excited as a Sun Belt fan. And I live in South Georgia, so I'm kind of in Sun Belt country. That this is kind of a big deal now. And it's no longer the Fun Belt. One of the coaches said, I forgot who it was, it's no longer the Fun Belt. It's actually like real good football.
I think it's such a big deal, like the whole branding aspect of the Fun Belt, now Sun Belt aspect. I live in central Illinois, so I don't live in Sun Belt country by any means. But the whole reason that I came to enjoy the Sun Belt is because of that fun aspect of it, the high-scoring, fun teams. I had a friend who played basketball at Coastal Carolina, so that kind of drew me into the conference. But at the same time, now what it's turned into, rising, like Commissioner Gill is saying, is how great this conference is. And like you said, I think about every coach said, this is the best G5 conference in college football. And I think it's pretty loud and clear that that's the case. Tremendous football being played.
Well, it might be a Power 5 conference soon enough with the Pac-12, the way the Pac-12 is going.
Yeah.
And the way they're building, and the Pac-12 is going like this, and Sun Belt's going up. It could be one of the better conferences in college football. I love the conference just because I think it's the most balanced conference in college football. A lot of people would say Louisiana Monroe was the worst team in the conference, and they beat Louisiana, who's one of the better teams in the conference. And I think from top to bottom. And then James Madison comes to the conference and kind of does well, and Marshall. And it just a lot of good institutions that have a football brand, and it's just great to see. And then you talk about Coastal, right? Coastal is a small little school, the teal, and they're kind of with the teal turf, and they're kind of like Boise State-ish, but if you actually watch them, and they've been able to compete, and we'll get into them in a little bit, that's like a brand of football. And I know they're going through some changes right now, but like they have their own brand, the Chants.
Absolutely. I mean, that ball at the beach brand that they have it'll be interesting to see moving forward what that turns into with the new regime and everything. But I think there's so many teams in this league that have like I know culture is kind of a buzzword, especially me as a former coach. Like
Yeah.
Everybody wants to have a culture and all this and that. But a lot of these programs in this conference have a definitive way of how they want to do things and how they play. And the fact that everybody is fairly close from a geographic standpoint, but then also very, very close in a competitive standpoint just makes it a fantastic league.
Yeah, it's definitely awesome because obviously they live in SEC country. Most of these schools they reside in SEC country, and these are the schools that are right below the SEC schools. Like in Georgia, you got Georgia State and Georgia Southern. They're kind of, and they every state has that, and all these teams are those schools that are right below the University of Alabama. You got Troy and you got South Alabama. Some would say Auburn's down there too. I don't know. I don't live in Alabama, but you go to Mississippi, right? And obviously after Mississippi State, you got Southern Miss. Same thing in Louisiana. You can go through all of them, and all these schools are at that level. And it's just really cool to see that it's good football, and these smaller schools are getting better and better and better. And a lot of times, like Coastal beat A&M. I mean, Appalachian State beat A&M last year. Like they can compete on the big stage now. So I love it. I personally love it. And like you said, the cultures for every single team, and we'll touch on that because I picked up on that on the media day, just what the message is being sent and the culture and who's talking like what and who's politicking and who's just happy to be there and whose seat is a little bit warm and toasty. Like you kind of picked that up in a lot of the media day. But all right, we'll start with the teams. We'll go through the teams. We'll start with the defending champs, Troy. They went 12-2 last year, 7-1 in the conference. John Summerall's there. He talked about the G5 strength, about how the Sun Belt is the strongest. He was probably the loudest when it came to politicking about how great the Sun Belt is, because he feels that his team should get an opportunity in one of the big bowls. And they're politicking already and trying to get those sound bites rolling. And John Summerall is definitely one of them. But if you want to talk about culture, he's kind of got a culture there.
Absolutely. And I think the big thing for them, like the big, I guess, question or statement heading into the year for them is, can they live up to the hype? Yeah. It's a big thing to look at for them. I mean, they're on an 11-game winning streak, which is second best in the country, behind Georgia, who obviously, I mean, they are what they are.
It's Georgia.
And you're right. Some of the key guys back looking at Troy. I mean, you got quarterback Gunnar Watson, running back Kamani Vidal, who was a second-team all-conference player, wide receivers Deshaun Stoudemire and Jabari Butler, defensive lineman T.J. Jackson was a first-team all-conference guy, nose tackle Buda Jones was a second-team all-conference guy, linebacker Richard Gibnor, and then safety Del Petris, and then cornerback Reddy Stewart was a first-team all-conference guy. So they got some really good pieces back, both offensively and defensively, which allows for that hype to be made. And then obviously with the winning streak that they're on, leads to that hype. And I completely understand why Coach Summerall is trying to push that. I don't want to say narrative. I think that's the wrong way to put it, but he needs to push that, because that's how he's going to get his team that could have a very, very successful season to be potentially that G5 representative in the New Year's Six Bowls.
Yeah, it's what Nick Saban does. When his team's not the automatic bid for the SEC, he goes on all the college football shows and he starts getting those little sound bites of why his team deserves to be there. And in the G5, you've got all these teams, and one team's going to be represented most likely. Just one is going to get the shot. So you have to start politicking, because you're not going to get the chance to go against the Tulane. I know South Alabama will, but Troy won't be able to go head-to-head against the Tulane because there's no championship. They're not in the same conference. So he's definitely starting his politics, and he needs to. Unfortunately, the conference does, and Keith Gill started that. Commissioner Gill started that right off the bat. You could tell that they were going with a message of rising, and they were going to tell everyone hey, we are legit down here. So I think Summerall did it definitely.
I think an interesting thing to look at for Troy as well is they play at Kansas State this year, and Tulane played at Kansas State last year. So there's that similarity there where Tulane won at Kansas State. It kind of propelled their season into what it became. Yeah. Kansas State's going to be very good again this year. They could win the Big 12 again like they did last year. So I think that similarity there allows for that connection to be made and for the potential for Troy, if they're able to get that win there on the road, that propel them into a special place for this season.
Yeah. Talking about Tulane, one team starts their season in Tulane against Tulane in New Orleans at Yeoman Stadium. South Alabama, 10-3 last year, 7-1 in the conference. Only loss was to Troy. Kane Womack starts his third season at the helm. His message was recapture, and kind of like continue the trend. And he was probably the only coach, or maybe not the only one, but like he was the one that talked about the whole environment and that they were tailgating on campus and they were building like this identity. And South Alabama has changed a lot over the last 3 years. Of course, he's going to claim that. And their 10-6 loss against Troy, I think, is really the motivation for their entire season. And it starts with Tulane. They need to beat Tulane if they intend to be the G5 rep. But they have 18 starters coming back. I'm excited for them. I'm not going to go too much into my preview of the team, but I love this team. I'm just going to say it.
Getting that win week 1 in Tulane, I think, is going to be big, and it propels them. They're already on an upward trajectory. So, I mean, they have all the pieces. Like you said, all those 18 starters back, 8 on offense, 8 on defense, both kicker and punter. They got some tremendous talent. Carter Bradley at quarterback is a heck of a football player who could have a special season this year. Running back LaDamian Webb was a first-team all-conference guy. Wide receiver Devin Vachon is really talented as well. They got some good, talented players back on defense. And I think that the cool thing to think about with this program is how young the program really is. I mean, it hasn't been around terribly long, maybe 10 years or so. Yeah. But just what they've been able to do in that short amount of time. Yes, they're in Alabama. They're in Mobile. They have a great recruiting area and base to go off of. But at the same time, they've had to do the hard work, and they've done it. And I think they'll reap those rewards this season.
Yeah, definitely. My favorite player on the team is Yam Banks. He's a jack of all trades. I'm a defensive guy, so he is the guy to watch out. I love Carter Bradley. You talked about their offensive weapons. The Kane train. Did you hear that comment? I don't know if you heard that.
Yes.
And Kane Womack's like, hey, I did not come up with that. Like, that is not a real thing. But Carter Bradley, it seems like they have a lot of good relationship. There's a lot of good stuff going on there. And I'm excited to see what the Jaguars do. It's funny because the Jaguars came to play Georgia Southern, and I could not stand their basketball team. I really could not. And I was like, man, this team just bugs me with the red, white, and blue and their USA and like how cliche is that? And then you start to really dig into the program and everything, and it's kind of a legit program for being in Alabama. And, you know, me living in Georgia, it's just Alabama. That's different. You know what I mean? But I really like this Kane Womack team. And I look forward to I think it's in November, Troy versus South Alabama. But
that'll be a heck of a game.
Definitely. We're talking about a South team, Southern Mississippi. 7-6 last year, 4-4. Will Hall comes back for his third season. He talked about finally getting it done. They're kind of stuck in the middle for me personally. I know they got I know a name you're going to say is going to be Frank Gore Jr., but I don't know about this team. They're just there. I know we're going to split up in our previews, the haves, nots, and the question marks. For me personally, and we haven't even discussed it together, this is a big question mark. I really don't know where they're going. What's your quick take on it?
I think, of course, Frank Gore Jr. is fantastic, but I think a question mark is still the quarterback position, just because you don't know what's going on there. They've done a great job adding P5 transfers across the board, so they've obviously added a talent to the pool. But at the same time, I agree with you. I mean, that there's key question marks here. You can't have Frank Gore playing a super back every play, as fun as it is and as good as he is at it. I mean, we can't. You can't be asking him to do that every play.
Well, it was the year before. He actually played quarterback a little bit too, right? They ran a lot of Wildcat with him.
The Southern Miss faithful tagged it the superback, and I remember watching their game against Louisiana Tech 2 years ago. He threw a 60-yard bomb, and it was right pinpoint accuracy, and I'm just like, what is this? I mean, he's a heck of a football player. I mean, obviously he's got fantastic genes, but still,
the gene game is strong.
Yes.
The only problem I have with Frank Gore Jr. is that he is getting so many touches that I feel bad for him, because you know how the running back is kind of like downgraded, like not taken so seriously in the NFL, especially, and in college football, it's more a committee, and the miles start to rack up. And I just wish they find somewhere else where he doesn't have to be the only offensive weapon. And it starts with the quarterback. You're 100% correct. They definitely have one of the weaker quarterback rooms in the conference right now.
Absolutely.
All right, next one, Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns, 7-7 last year, 4-4. I'm going to butcher his last name. I told you before pre-show. Coach Desermore, his second season replacing Billy Napier. He talked about the rivalry with Southern Miss so extensively. I felt like they were chasing Southern Miss, which is crazy, because I feel like in the last couple of years, Southern Miss should have been chasing them. But it seemed like he was chasing it. So I grew up in New England, and the Red Sox always talked about the Yankees, but the Yankees never talked about the Red Sox, never talked about the Red Sox. Yankee fans would like, we're not talking about them. Louisiana seems like they're the Red Sox in this, and it's just mind-blowing, because a couple of years ago they were the power in the conference. Does Coach Desermore get this team moving in the right direction, or are they just another question mark?
I agree with that take that you just had. It's very odd to me to see that, because I mean, they were the power in the West for an extended period of time. I mean, nobody could really touch them for a handful of years there. Obviously, a coaching change and things take place, and he's got his work to do. I think the question. I think they are a question mark, of course. And the question I have is, can they rebound? And can they rebound to the point of I'm not saying that they have to win the West every year like they were, but can they get back to being that upper echelon team in the West year in, year out? And I think that's the big question mark for them. They have to decide who's going to be the starting quarterback. But they're an interesting looking into the season, because I feel like they could take that step, but then at the same time, there's question marks too, where it's just like it could go one way or the other.
Yeah, it was very odd to me that they were just not the Raging Cajun. You know what I mean? Like the Cajuns were always the team in the West, like Troy and South Alabama. They were all changing Louisiana, like you said, and now it just seems like all of a sudden they have an identity crisis, and they don't know that they're kind of where they are. Like Desermore doesn't know. It's not like Billy Napier, where they're coming and you know exactly what they're going to do. They're going to beat you up. He's going to play a little bit physical. Like they're going to win on all assets of the game, all facets of the game. This just seems like I don't know. It's just identity crisis.
I agree. I mean, you knew Billy Napier was scared money don't make money, and they were going to come out and just hit you in the mouth, like you said.
Yeah.
And this team, I agree with you. I mean, it's like, what are they going to be?
Yeah, and it might be just because of all the transfer portal and all that, and that's starting to hit on them. We know that the Louisiana schools don't get the funding like some of the other schools do. Maybe they're behind in that, and that could be what's going on here. But it just seems like if fell off so fast, and they were passed out by the Alabama schools so fast. And I just talking about another Louisiana school, Louisiana Monroe, the toughest job in America, in my opinion. Terry Bowden is in his third year. He went 4-8, 3-5 in the conference, which is crazy to me that he got 3 wins with this team. Because if you look at them statistically, they were 111th last year on offense, 109th on defense, and somehow still got 4 wins and 3 in the conference. He's in his 40th season, which I just turned 40 like this week. So like it kind of hit home. Terry Bowden's been coaching as long as I've been alive, and he's in the toughest job in America. What's your take on this team? Because I like the school. I've always kind of had like a little affinity towards it, but it just seems like, man, they're just so far behind everyone else.
They are, and I agree with you. I mean, this is a really, really tough job. I would agree, probably the toughest in FBS college football. Like you said, the funding aspect and everything that they have to deal with. But Terry Bowden is a fantastic football coach. I mean, he's proven that every stop he's had. And to your point of him coaching for 40 years, I mean, he's been coaching longer than I've been alive. So that is mind-boggling to me. For somebody who coached for 10 years like myself, I mean, to think about coaching at that extended period of time, obviously his genes had a lot to do with that as well. But again, I think, like you said, this is a team that they're going to play hard. They're going to play extremely hard. And they've made that home venue in Monroe a tough place to play. And it seems like when those upper echelon teams in the conference come there, they do struggle a bit playing there. And maybe it's because it's kind of out there, but at the same time, it has a lot to do with the culture that he's created there, where those guys play an extremely high level for him, and he gets the most out of them that he possibly can.
Yeah, well, you don't want to see ULM a week before your big game.
Yes, absolutely.
Louisiana kind of had that. I don't know where ULM. I don't have the schedules right in front of me. But I don't know where they end up in South Alabama and Troy's schedule. And are they right before when the big game in November? I'm not 100% sure, but they are thin at every position. Their quarterback, they got the JUCO transfer, Jaya Wright. Like we said, the offensive line, like the whole entire offensive line transferred out. So now you got to get an entire line that gels. It's a tough job. Terry Bowden's the perfect man because he is the guy that's going to go ask for funding. He has no problem asking for funding. A young guy would have a tough time there. He can go out there and, he gives that little 40-year-old, I don't know, like special twinkle in his eye or something like his dad had. And he can go talk to the Chamber of Commerce, and he can go talk to, the mayors and the supporters and, the big businesses in the local community, and he can go get a couple more dollars. But in the day of the NIL, it's so tough if you can't fund.
Absolutely. I think one guy to talk about for them, wide receiver Tyron Howell, he's a second-team all-conference guy. And for them to have a player at that level being a second-team all-conference guy, that speaks a lot to what Coach Bowden's doing. Because historically, this program hasn't produced players at that level. And I mean, they got a good one there. He's a heck of a football player, and that they have that to lean on, at least. I mean, like you said, I mean, they got so many question marks and they're thin in a lot of places, but at least they got a couple guys that they can lean on.
See, what they're kind of going to end up doing, and it kind of, because of the funding, they're going to get a lot of transfer out. So they're going to get guys there, and Terry Bowden can coach them up, and then all of a sudden now the bigger schools are going to come down and just cherry pick who they want. And that's kind of what they did to this team. And now Terry Bowden's got to go from 4-8 team and now go replace all these guys that are talented. And it's a tough job. I root for them, like, to win and be tough, but it's just almost impossible, especially when you're chasing the teams like Troy and South Alabama right now that seem to get a lot of funding and a lot of support from their state. ULM is just a tough gig.
Absolutely.
Another a gig that might be open soon, in my opinion, probably the hottest seat in my opinion, I know we can argue a couple here, but the hottest seat in the conference is Butch Jones. He is at Arkansas State. They went 3-9 last year, 1-7 in the conference, which it's Arkansas State. In their Twitter handle, they got the 5-time trophy because they've been the champs 5 times in the Sun Belt. Like they have a Gus Malzahn, Hugh Freeze, like success. Butch Jones comes from the SEC. He should be able to. But the one thing I will pick up about the media day is he kept talking about his 3rd-year record and every stop that he has. And I'm like, man, this sounds like a guy that's pleading to his board of trustees right now saying, hey, give me a chance. I had to rebuild this whole thing, which is, I don't know if that's 100% true, but I had to rebuild this whole thing, and this is my 3rd year. Give me a chance. And I just felt like he talked about himself more than any other coach did.
I picked up the exact same thing, honestly. As a former head coach at the college level, I can speak to that. I mean, thankfully I've never had to do that, but it's a real thing. And they've had the back-to-back #1 recruiting classes in the conference. So at some point that you would think that's going to pay off. I personally don't think it's going to pay off till 2024 at the earliest. I think this year they're going to, I don't want to say struggle, but they're not, I don't think they're going to win enough games to be bowl eligible this year. It'll be interesting to see what that leads to when it comes to him and his future. But I agree. When he got hired, I really thought, like, with the history of this program, I thought, man, he's going to be able to do something there coming from where he's coming from. And they've got some really good transfers in this year at the quarterback position, wide receiver position that they're really going to look to utilize. But again, this has become, I don't want to say a tougher job, but it's become tougher than I would have expected. And I think it has a lot to do with the rise of the Alabama schools. And this is going to be a really interesting year for them.
They were the name brand, in my opinion, of the Fun Belt.
Mm-hmm.
They had that
Absolutely.
offense. It was, and I don't understand. After the Anderson left to Utah State, right?
Yes.
Yeah. After Anderson left to Utah State and they brought in an SEC guy, I thought this was just going to be like, okay, they're going to maintain. Mm-hmm. And you could say it's the Troy but they get some support. It's not like they're in the Louisiana schools. They get some support. There's only 2 schools, right, in Division I in the state. And with the history and the pride, and I don't know, man. I just feel like he has fallen on hard times, and if he doesn't win this year, he probably has the hottest seat, in my opinion. Because it matters there. It matters there. We'll talk about another coach, I'm guessing, in a few teams. But it matters a lot at Arkansas State more than the other school. Like the Wolves, like football matters. And
right.
We've talked about it ad nauseum. Hugh Freeze, Gus Malzahn. Like these guys went there and then got promoted to bigger jobs, better jobs. Mm-hmm. This is a stepping stone school because you're able to win there and to take that next step. So I just feel like Butch Jones is going to struggle this year. But
I think there's an interesting parallel between like Jim McElwain, who's at Central Michigan, and then Butch Jones right now. I think there's an interesting because they're both at schools, Central Michigan and then Arkansas State, that have had a history of winning and they're struggling. So it's kind of weird to kind of see the parallels between 2 former SEC coaches at programs that you would think would have success, but they're just not doing it. So it's kind of weird.
Yeah, it definitely is. Talking about a program that's just doing it in a completely different way, Texas State. 4-8 last year, 2-6. GJ Kinney, which, side note, that's the worst like 2-letter name that you can have because the alliteration is just unreal. GJ, like every time I'm catching myself like, am I saying it right? Comes in from Incarnate Ward, and he brings in 50 new players. He used the transfer portal a lot with his recruiting class, the most fluid roster in the conference by far. What are your thoughts on how they're trying to build quick and with Incarnate? I guess we'll call them Incarnate Ward State, right?
Basically, I think everybody kind of agrees on this, that they are, quote unquote, the sleeping giant of sorts in this conference, just where they're at. I mean, there's no reason they shouldn't have success. There's a ton of schools in Texas, obviously, but I think with the Sun Belt and that trajectory that they're going in, I feel like they can really pass up a lot of these other G5 schools in Texas. Yeah. They just got to win games. And I think that they found a coach now where they can do that. He's a coach that really resonates with the players really well. I've heard a lot of good things from like former players that played for him and how much they enjoyed it. And I guess if you're an offensive player, you're going to really enjoy playing in that system. I mean, it makes sense with the yardage and points and all that that's going to come out of that. But I think that they could be a real surprise this year in the conference. And I think that they can compete for bowl eligibility.
I agree 100%. I think the biggest message that was sent at Media Day was that he brought in Nash Jones, I believe his name, the offensive lineman from Incarnate Ward that hasn't even played it down yet for Texas State. And, you get the other schools that brought their stars and their big names and their leaders in the locker room. This is a guy that's been there as long as he has, and he is going on Media Day talking. And I'm just saying he's setting a tone that this is a new brand of Texas State football. Like we're not going to be in the past. The only thing I would say about GJ is that I think if it's successful, he's not there long, because I think if you win in the state of Texas, you're going to get attention, especially with all the other schools in Texas. But you're right. He's got to take over the UTSAs and the other smaller programs first. He's got to be better than them before he can go looking for a better job. But it's going to be high-powered, right? Like Incarnate Ward was up and down talking about that. He's got Lindsey Scott, the Walter Payton Award winner, on his staff now. I cover the USFL, and he was drafted by the Maulers in the USFL. And I was hoping he'd come to the Maulers, but if you look on his Instagram, it says that he got drafted in the XFL too. It says that he's an XFL quarterback and an analyst for Texas State. So I don't know how I feel about that personally, because I love the Pittsburgh Maulers, but there's a lot of turnover. There's a lot of turnover. I think that I'm not saying they're going to be bad. I'm not going to say they're good. They are definitely a question mark.
Absolutely.
Talking about a team that's probably not a question mark, we're going east now. ODU. Old Dominion went 3-9 last year, 2-6 in the conference. I just felt like their Media Day performance, or not, just communication, was bland. It just felt like it had no flavor. Like even Terry Bowden, he felt like he was glad to be there and that the conference is getting better and we will get better. But with ODU, it just felt like we're here. Like we're here. What do you think?
Yeah, I hope that they aren't at the point where they're just like, we're in the East. It's extremely difficult. I don't know if we can get there. I hope that they don't have that mindset. I do like the coaching staff there. I think it's a smart coaching staff. I think they're good coaches. I think the administration just needs to have patience with them. And I think that they can have success there. I mean, they beat Virginia Tech last year. So, I mean, it wasn't like they were just downtrodden. They're in an absolutely fantastic recruiting area, so they should be able to have success there. They returned one of the best players in college football and linebacker Jason Anderson. He was an All-American, led college football in tackles, I believe, with 186. But that's just mind-blowing how you get that many tackles in 12 games. That's astounding to me. But they're definitely lacking in a lot of areas. They lose their quarterback to Western Michigan. They got a lot of question marks, and I mean, I think it's very apparent that they're the worst team in the East. But again, I think they need that patience with that staff, because I think the staff can do well.
All right. Talking about the staff, we're going to Georgia State. Sean Elliott might be on the second hottest seat in the conference outside of Butch Jones. Maybe the hottest. It could be your take. He just seemed like he was relieved to be there, that he actually made it that far. And then he talked about how that he basically started over in January. They restarted the whole program and new leadership, or not new players, but the leadership, and the players had to lead. And it just seemed like they were just redoing everything. And it just seemed like Sean Elliott was like, hey, I'm glad I'm here. I'm just glad I'm here. Thank you for having me in New Orleans.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think the seat is very hot. This is a program that I think we all agree, being in Atlanta, they should be very good. And the fact that they're not is puzzling. They just haven't been able to put it together for an extended period of time. Again, a newer program, but still, you're in Atlanta. I mean,
Yep.
You're not going to find much a better recruiting area in the country. You don't have to drive very far to get fantastic players.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, I felt like he was like grasping at straws, just kind of like, I'm so happy that I haven't been let go yet. And going to the player driven examples, I think that's when coaches who know that their seat is hot, they want to just, okay, let's let the players lead this, and then hopefully they can do better than I'm doing, type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. The biggest stat for them, they were 0-5 in games decided by 7 points or less. So they could not execute. They had North Carolina on the ropes. I think they were tied in the fourth quarter, and they couldn't get the job done. I know App State, we'll get to that in a second, but it just seems like either they're overrated or they're just underperform every single time. And it's happened for a couple of years. And like you said, Atlanta, me living in Georgia, like there's a prideful stat that goes around the state of Georgia, especially around high schools. We have the most per GDP or per person per capita. We have the most Division I football players in the country. We're more than Texas when it comes to a ratio. It's very fertile. Atlanta is very fertile. It's like they should be able to, he doesn't have to leave North Georgia or Central Atlanta. He doesn't even have to come down to South Georgia. He can let Southern keep all the South Georgia. He could just stay in the Atlanta area, and he could probably field a team, and a quality team. Atlanta is also one of those towns that attracts the young people. It's a fun town for them,
right?
And you can't tell me there's no money there. You just can't. You can't.
Right.
Coca-Cola is right there. Coca-Cola, like if you look outside the stadium, you could see the Coca-Cola building, and you could see a downtown Atlanta. Like they should be able to. They're obviously in the biggest metro area in this entire conference. They should be able to take advantage of that. He hasn't been able to. I think if they have a season where they don't go to a bowl game, they could be 5-7 or 6-6 and don't go to a bowl game. They will be making a change from Sean Elliott, especially because of the next team that we're going to discuss.
Mm-hmm. I do like Darren Granger, their quarterback. I think he's a talented player, but
he's all their offense right now.
Right.
Like the consistency, he's rushing, passing. He's very talented, but they've got to have a whole team effort to take it to the next step. Talk about a whole team effort that's needed. Georgia Southern, the high-powered offense, which is so weird to say living in South Georgia. Like until last year, it was triple option. I used to go to the games, and I was like, what is this, right? Clay Helton comes back for his second season. They went 6-7, lost in the bowl game. That's why they're under 500. 3-5. The one thing I will say about Clay Helton's presentation at Media Day, he talked about Vantrease so much. He was the one that just talked about last year a lot, and like they were 6-7, but he kept going back to Kyle Vantrease. Like, hey, he's not Stetson Bennett. He's not going to have a 9th year of eligibility. He's just not going to. Like, he's done. Davis Brin comes in from Tulsa. The one thing I will say, but I'll let you go first because this is kind of my local team, so I kind of feel confident. Go ahead.
Yeah, you'll probably know more about him than I even do. So, but I think Davis Brin is a good addition there. I think he fits that system well, and I think he's going to have some real success there. And I think they proved last year with Vantrease that a transfer quarterback can come in there and have real success. The thing I question is if they do have the success that I think both of us think that they could have, and more down the road as well, how long does Clay Helton stay there moving forward? I think that they have. I think they're going to have a ton of success. The athletic department and the school has really bought into athletics and promoting it, and they're really taking a good stand in that. So I think moving forward, it's going to be really good. It's just how long can they sustain it moving forward?
It's crazy because Southern used to be one of those schools where like only obviously option offense coaches come, but now the old guard is finally okay with an offense because Willie Fritz kind of left because Willie Fritz was kind of wanting to do a little different stuff, and people gave him so much pushback that he went to Tulane, a little private school in New Orleans, and look what he's done there. I just Clay Helton, you are right. If they go into Madison and beat Wisconsin, who's kind of going through a transition with the spread, and somehow they pull that off, Clay Helton might not be there at Thanksgiving. He might not be there for the Georgia State game, or at one of the games at the end of the season. Like the defense needs to improve. I will say that. They were on the field, I believe, the 5th most minutes in the entire country last year because the offense scores so much, and then their defense was not able to get a stop or get off the field, and the other teams were able to dog walk them, as the young kids say, all the way down the field. Caleb Hood is the best receiver in the conference, in my opinion, and who would have thought the best receiver would have committed to a triple option school where he was going to get 8 passes a year to getting 87 grabs last year, and probably will get better this year. But that's just my personal opinion on that.
He's a stud. He is a good one.
Yeah. The most I get excited about Davis Brin is that he was more successful at Tulsa than Van Treese was at Buffalo coming into Georgia Southern. So the fact that he's already got kind of a leg up where he's kind of been in that a higher power offense, I think he can hit the ground running with Clay Helton. But you're 100% right. I believe if Clay gets going and they take off and he's able to change a program from a triple option to a high-powered offense and they're successful 2 years in a row, you could see an SEC school or an ACC school coming, or even if the Pac-12 is still existing in 2025, one of those schools coming.
Boston College could be open very soon. I could see that as a possibility.
I imagine California Clay up there in the Northeast. But so going from Southern, we're going to the biggest rival, App State. I believe it's one of the most underrated rivalries in college football. I don't think it gets enough love nationally. Sean Clark returns 6-6 last year. I know you got some hot takes kind of on Sean Clark. He talked about recovering App State football identity, let's get back to App State football. I don't think they were that bad last year. I know 6-6 is not an App State season, but like they lost by 2 to North Carolina, where there's 124 points. They beat A&M. They beat Troy. Yes, the second half of the season was bad, but I think they can figure it out. What do you got?
I do agree. They definitely were. They weren't a 6-6 team when you watched them. Like that, they were better than that. They just kind of lost some games in kind of fluke ways a little bit, and it just didn't pan out. I think the big thing for them is can they rebound after the 7-year postseason streak that they were on. That obviously didn't happen last year, so they're looking to start a new one over. I think everybody knows the brand that they have in this conference is second to none, because since they've joined the conference, they've been an upper echelon team. The only thing I question, I guess, is this the right regime to be leading it? I feel like he had a lot of success off of the previous coaching staff and the players that they had in place there. So I'm really intrigued to see moving forward what that looks like. I think it's absolutely a place we've seen before where they can win and win frequently. I think I think this staff, they just have to prove it.
Yeah, you talk about the brand identity at the beginning of the show. App State's got the brand identity because they have the most. They have the most wins in the FBS since the college football playoffs been since they started the playoff that have not been in a playoff. Them and Boise State have the most wins. They have more wins than Penn State, more wins than USC. Like teams that haven't been in the playoffs, they have the most. This is an established program. Sean Clark is in a tough spot because he has you have to have 10 win seasons. You have to. It's kind of like Nebraska, where they hold this standard. This is the standard. This is the standard. Nebraska's finally, I think, realizing their identity is now changed. But App State's got that identity, and they don't want to fall behind James Madison, Coastal, Georgia Southern, maybe Marshall. Like the East is so loaded. If you take 2 down seasons, App State, that brand, that identity, you could be A&M, sweet, but you've got to be able to have the 10-win seasons for kids to go there. So,
right.
Moving on down the coast to your team, or at least the team you root for, I guess, the most because your buddy went to school there. The Teal, the Fighting Teal, the Coastal Carolina. Tim Beck's first season, 9-4, 6-3. Give me a name that is not Grayson McCall. Go.
Well, Jared Brown, he was a freshman All-American at wide receiver. So there we go. But yes, the Coastal was the team that made me become so interested in the Sun Belt Conference just because of my friend playing basketball there. And my favorite color is teal, by the way, but that's beside the point. But I mean, this is a team that I think this year will have success because Grayson McCall, I mean, he is as good as it gets in this conference. But moving forward, I think is the real question mark. What does their identity look like? Under Coach Chadwell and that staff, you knew they were having so much fun. They were balling at the beach. They were having those videos in the locker room after every win, just having all kinds of fun. I don't think Tim Beck is that type of coach. I don't think that's going to be happening anymore. But so that it's going to be really interesting. I think you obviously, like I said, you have Grayson McCall, you have Sam Pinkney at wide receiver, Jared Brown at wide receiver, Reese White at running back, CJ Beasley. They're going to have a really good offense. Is it going to be where they have to outscore everybody again because the defense is still a bit behind from the 2020 year that they had? So I think offensively, the team's going to be great. It's just going to be what's it looking like on the other side of the ball. And I'm really, really intrigued to see what their identity turns into. I think this is a team that I don't want to say they're a question mark because I think we know that they're going to be pretty good. But at the same time, with the change of the guard, I think that's going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah, especially because Chadwell's offense is so unique. And Tim Beck being an offense coordinator and being a veteran offense coordinator, does he go in there and saying, hey, this is kind of how I want to do it? Or is he going to be like, hey, you know what? I'm going to take some things from him, and I'm going to mash them together. We don't know yet. It'd be interesting. It's really interesting to see a guy because he's in his 50s get his first job. And it's kind of an established identity brand. We go back to the brand rising, right?
Yeah.
It's all about the brand on this episode, but does he take the Coastal brand, or does he kind of put his own spin on it, or does he kind of mash it together? We don't know yet. We really don't.
Yeah, yep.
That's the question. But one brand we do know is Kurt Signetti down in Harrisonburg, Virginia. James Madison came to the conference and ruled the conference. 8-3, 6-2 in the conference. Their 2 losses to Southern and I believe it's Troy, right? I'm not 100% sure.
I don't remember. I should remember that, but I don't.
Unfortunately, they couldn't compete for No, they did beat Coastal. They should have been in the Sun Belt Championship, but because of the archaic rule that I will never understand, that when you move up, you cannot participate in postseason. But JMU comes up, and their defense was so nasty and so good, and they knew exactly what they're doing. They're fifth in the nation, second best versus the run. You know who number one was? The national champ. So this James Madison team is legit, and I loved it. And you could see that Signetti at the media day was kind of like, get off my lawn, old guy. That I should be like, leave me alone. We're legit, because he kept talking about conference championships and conference championships and conference championships. No one else talked about conference championships except like Troy, or if they're in the pursuit of it. He talked about how 6 out of 7 years they've been conference champions, no matter where they go. What do you feel about the Dukes?
I think that defensively they're still going to be great. I mean, that's who they are. They're like you said, they're elite defensively, and that's going to continue. They got to figure out the quarterback position. I think that's going to be the biggest thing for them, and however long that takes could lead to how their conference slate goes. Because, like we've said, the East is very, very tough, and if you don't have a quarterback who you believe in to lead you to that success in that division, you're going to struggle no matter how good your defense is. So I think that's a real thing to look at. But and it like you said too, that rule that allows them not to participate for a conference championship in a bowl game, even this year, still it's head scratching. I can't stand it. The NCAA is just ridiculous. But
yeah, we can have a whole episode of just the NCAA gripes. So.
Oh, don't get me started. I'm a former coach at the NCAA, so don't get me started.
Talking about another newcomer, Marshall, 9-4 last year, 5-3 in the conference. Charlie Huff, they beat Notre Dame last year. They were another solid defensive team. The quarterback position is something to watch. I know they brought Cam Fetcher to the media day, so he kind of sent a message, so he didn't have to take questions about it. But they got this boy in the wing with a familiar last name, right?
Yeah.
What do you take on the Thunder and Herd?
I love their coaching staff. I love Coach Huff. I think he's fantastic. I'm really, really excited about him and his leadership. And he talked a lot about leadership from the top down in the conference. And I think that was really cool and important to see that a coach like him who I think could really have the potential to move in the future to a different higher level job, talk about the leadership in the conference. And I think he really enjoys coaching at Marshall. And I think that could be something that leads him to stay there for quite some time. But Marshall was one of those teams last year who had a pretty darn elite defense themselves. They were one of the top rush defenses in college football. I believe they were the best defense on third down percentage-wise last year as well. And I mean, yeah, you lose pieces every year, but they have a honorable mention All-American and cornerback Micah Abram, who is as good as it gets in the conference, and a lot of other really good pieces. Somebody I'm really excited to see, running back Rasheem Ali. I think he's as good as it gets as well.
Definitely. You talked about it. Huff says the right things. It seems like his program is going the right way. You talk about a bigger job. He's another one like Clay Helton that if you see a 10-win season out of this team this year, he might be the coach in Morgantown.
That's a possibility.
Or a school like that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying the next step. He's not going to. I don't think he's going to get a SEC job right off the bat. I think it'll be another step if he leaves after this year. Now, if he makes Marshall the powerhouse of the Sun Belt, right, and he's in the big bowl game every year, yeah, he can get a big job because he does have that personality kind of, and he just says the right things, and I just really enjoy watching Charlie Huff and his Thunder and Herd operate. But you hit the nail on the head with Ali. If he recovers to his freshman form, they're going to be dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. To tell you the truth, that take on the Rasheen Ali was kind of cold, but I'm ready for some heat. You ready for some heat?
Absolutely.
All right, this is going to be our segment. Every episode, we're going to end it with a moment of heat, where we kind of give a hot take. Should get interesting. It's a little easier right now because you got the whole season in front of you, and you don't have to really figure it out right now because you should be able to do it real quick, right? When you start using your hot takes, then you got to start like game planning. Like maybe I should wait for this one.
Right.
You want to go first or second? You want to go first?
You could go ahead.
All right. But mine, if you listen to what we just discussed over the past hour, I'm not a big believer in Coastal Carolina. I think Tim Beck and Grayson McCall aren't aligned perfectly. It might help Grayson McCall try to get to the NFL because he runs more of a pro style. It's not so quirky. But I don't think Grayson McCall is the offensive player of the year for the first time in this decade, which is crazy to say. But in college football, that a quarterback's been there for 4 years. But Grayson McCall won't be the offensive player of the year. I think it's going to be Card Bradley at South Alabama, but we'll go into that when we go into the previews. Hot take, Bobby, go.
I think Rasheen Ali is the best running back in the Sun Belt, even more so than Frank Gore Jr., who I'm a big fan of, and LaDamian Webb, who's at South Alabama.
Oh, wow. But Frank Gore Jr., the Eagle fans are going to come at you, man.
They are. And I have a lot of Eagle fan followers, so I don't like saying that. But I think Rasheen Ali is special. And if he can get back to that freshman form, he could take Marshall to a special place this season.
Definitely. All right, well, that's our first moment of heat. Would you call it hot takes, or is this kind of warm this week, huh?
Yeah. I don't think we're like it's not like it's 110 degrees outside like it is in the whole United States right now. But I think we put our foot in at least.
Yeah, we're preheating right now. It's simple as that. Yes. We're not at the 350 where we can start baking. We're preheating right now.
Those are coming. Elevated. Those takes are coming.
Those are coming. So next week we'll preview the have-nots. We haven't even discussed it. I think after listening to this episode, we kind of feel similar. So I think it will be an easy list. And then after that, the question marks, the haves, and then the season preview, and then we'll just do a normal show, recaps, all that kind of stuff, game predictions, keep you up on the news. Follow us on Twitter. Give me your Twitter one more time.
At TNT College Foot 1.
And on Spotify, listen to it.
Yes,
you're in the middle. You're in the middle of a special, right? Or what do you call it? Because that's not just a special.
This is my third year I've gone through, and I'm breaking down all 133 FBS college football programs. Tonight I just completed Hawaii, which I believe was program 87 out of 133. So I'm getting close to the end. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
The Sun Belt's the last ones, right?
Yes. Unfortunately, the Sun Belt is the last conference alphabetically.
So do you do the teams in alphabetical order too in their conference?
In the division, yes.
In their division, all right. So the last team possible is going to be, what is that, Texas
ULM.
Or Troy? Oh, ULM, right? The U.
Yeah.
Why you got to do them like that?
I know. I don't like.
They already don't have the funding. Like they're already in a tough spot. Now you save them all the way until the end.
I know, right? It's not fair.
Well, in a way, it could work best because it's closest to the season, right?
Right.
And people are really going to start turning up looking for college football content in the next month. Maybe ULM gets a benefit. Maybe Terry Bowden gets a couple dollars sent his way.
Hopefully that I hope I can do that for him. That'd be nice.
Yeah, there you go. All right, Bobby. So this show will come out Friday mornings, 11 o'clock in the morning, Eastern time. I know I got the East Coast bias. I'm sorry.
I grew up in the Eastern time zone in Michigan, so hey, that's fine.
All right, that works. This has been Statement Saturday, the show for the Sun Belt Conference. Thanks, Bobby.